everyone. Welcome to the LBC podcast, where we explore Christian theology and the practice for building up God's family. My name's Eric. I'm the lead pastor at LBC, and with me is the older statesman, the better-looking statesman, John Harrell.
Yes, I'm John Harrell, the worship director at LBC.
Yes, and he's so excited as the elder statesman to be here with us. Today we'll be tackling the topic of embracing singleness. And we know there's many forms of singleness, from widows to people who've been divorced. And we want to acknowledge that that's hard and offers us rare circumstances in life that's hard to be identified with. But on this podcast, we have two guests to help us explore some of the different feelings and behaviors that happen to our Christian brothers and sisters that are single. And what we want to do is ask them, how as a church can we understand? How can we be helpful but not hurtful? And how can we just kind of understand what's going on better? And with us today, we have Josh White, who recently graduated with his MDiv. And so he's super smart, super good looking, and loves Jesus. Hey, hi, Josh.
You're too kind. Seriously, though, it's good to be here. It's been a little while since I've been on the podcast, so it's good to be back.
Okay. Also with us, we have Ashley Mencias, the better-looking Mencias, who has been coming to LBC, and it's been exciting to get to know her. And she's here today. Say hello, Ashley.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to dive deep into this topic because I am a professional single person according to my brother and everyone who knows me. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Well, let's just start the podcast by acknowledging that we don't listen to Kevin, and that you're not a professional. You just have high standards, okay? And I want that for my daughters. High standards, hold out. I understand. He's just your brother.
I think this is already the better intro that we've ever done on the podcast. The amount of people we've been able to cover alone right here is awesome. Well, hey guys, Josh and what's your name? Ashley? Just kidding. Josh and Ashley, thank you so much for joining us on here today. And I know that we're going to have a lot of fun. And, our first question is rooted on the topic of time. I know that, I've got 4 kids, a wife. We're all home all the time in quarantine. And it just, between work and parenting and being a spouse, it feels like, we just have no time in the world, and we got to always jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. For someone who has the luxury, I would call it, of, just caring for yourself and nobody else is really at your heels all the time, or nobody's begging you for, goldfish crackers all day long. How do you stay busy during this time? That's probably on a lot of people's minds. And I just want to start off the conversation with that question. Josh, let's start with you. During this season, how do you stay busy with your time? How do you stay busy in the Word? Do you find time in the Word and the spiritual disciplines? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. As you mentioned, for those who are quarantined with families, it can be almost more chaotic right now than it usually even may be. And so it can kind of be different for singles, especially like myself. I just live by myself, so I'm not taking care of anyone else. So yeah, for me, staying busy, it's really a matter of choosing activities that I enjoy and also prioritizing the right things as well. So, I'm really thankful to still be able to work right now, but even still, I still have probably a lot more free time than I did before. And so I have to kind of figure out how to use that free time so that it's going to be beneficial throughout the day. And I think, a key part of that is going to be being committed to spending time in the Word and in prayer every single day. Just because you have more time to do so doesn't mean that it takes any less effort to do that. it still takes just as much effort to make sure you're committed to spending time in the Word and in prayer. One of my favorite quotes right now is from Charles Spurgeon, when he said, "The most important daily habit we can possess is to remind ourselves of the gospel." Whatever season of life you're in, I believe that that's true. And we do that by being committed to spending time in the Word, spending time in prayer, getting that in daily. So that's certainly an important aspect of it. And with it, understanding that the gospel is everything we need and so much more as well. And the gospel addresses all the problems that we have, especially the problems that we face within singleness as well. And so that's like the foundation of how I like to kind of start my day. On a more practical note, one thing I really try to do is I try to do different activities throughout the day instead of just doing one activity for the entire day. So like I try not to binge watch Netflix like all day. I try to just choose things that I like doing and kind of spend like maybe an hour or two on those things throughout the day. And switching from those different activities kind of keeps my mind focused, I find. So like I might watch Netflix for a little bit. I might go on a walk for a while. Like I might read a book for a while. That's another way that I keep my mind kind of entertained, is reading a book on something that I enjoy. So in general, I find for me that it's best with the extra time to feel that with multiple activities that I can do throughout the day. Because when I'm, giving into like just binge watching something all day, oftentimes I'm not gonna be my best. I'm not gonna really probably feel healthy when I do that, So I like to spread out those different activities throughout the day.
You mean hours and hours and hours of Netflix watching doesn't leave you in a healthy state?
No, it doesn't. And
Okay.
unfortunately, it often leaves you off worse than when you started.
Okay. Good. That's really good to note there. That's good. Thank you, Josh. Those are great examples, and thank you for sharing that insight into your life. Ashley, what about you? How are you staying busy these days? How do you find time for the spiritual disciplines as well in your life?
Yeah, at first it was pretty difficult because I'm like a busybody type person. Like I like to be active, I like to be social, I like to go out and do things, I like to be out with my friends. And so especially being quarantined, it has been really difficult. And I had to go from the mentality of, okay, what are my priorities for the day? Lord, how can you lead me today? What is something new or something different, something exciting? So for me, I need something exciting to kind of keep me going. And so I was able to just reevaluate, okay, what are my goals? What are goals that I've set for myself that I kind of put behind me, or that I've delayed, or that, I kind of just abandoned because I've been so busy or whatever. But recently, so one thing for me that's been really exciting is I'm thinking about pursuing master's and furthering my education. So that alone is kind of a big project that I've been able to tackle with keeping myself busy. And I think like the time is now and everybody's encouraging me, Ashley, you're single, you don't have kids, you can pick up and move to another state if you wanted to, and it really wouldn't affect a spouse. It wouldn't affect your kids. So, this would be the best time to transition or to make that kind of transition. So things like that, I think for me, just being someone who likes to set goals, what's something that I can do today to move forward, or to, what's one step that I can take to draw closer to that goal. So I think for me, that's it. But even practically, like on a daily basis, I have a roommate. Thankfully, I couldn't imagine living on my own. So kudos to you, Josh, because I don't know how you do it. I would go crazy if I didn't have a roommate. So we'll cook new recipes. We'll have a dance party in our living room. We'll watch a girly movie together and cry. But just things like that. But also, we'll pray together. We'll talk, we'll confess to each other. We'll have some serious, midnight conversations of like, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I need prayer for. I had a really bad day today and this is why. And so, I don't know, I would just say that's what it's looked like for me.
Wow, awesome. Well, those are some great answers. And Josh, I would encourage you to have a dance party. I could see it really helping you in the long run.
Just me and my dog.
Yep. I don't encourage you to cry at girly movies because there's no girl there to verify that you were crying kind of on her behalf. So, yeah, stay away from that one, but definitely the dance party. Maybe next podcast you could tell me how that goes.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. Okay. Building off that question is, what's the hardest part of the day for you? So if I'm listening to Josh, he doesn't want to binge watch. He doesn't want to procrastinate. If I'm listening to Ashley, she wants to keep things exciting. She doesn't want to get too bored. And so my question would be, is you're seeing what things you're trying to do. What's the hardest part of the day for you, Ashley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, so I was actually recently convicted by Psalm 90:12, which says to teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And so for me, I was convicted of just not adding value or purpose to my day. It was kind of like I'm more focused on keeping myself busy versus, genuinely serving the Lord and seeking ways to grow and to learn and to mature in my faith. And so for me, I would wake up some days and just be on social media, and I would be like, oh man, is this what I'm going to do all day? Like, God, what is the purpose? Where is the value in that? How am I growing, learning, maturing in that way? And I wasn't, so I literally had to, so I've been on like a 2-week social media break already. I literally had to cut that out and realize, okay, Ash, there are greater things you can be doing. And that's kind of what brought me back to my goals of, pursuing masters or, calling a friend. But also so I'm like an all or nothing type person. I'm either super, super productive or I'm sleeping. It's hard to find like an in between for me. It's either I'm go, 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 or I am out and don't talk to me, don't bother me, I need sleep. So that was one for me in the beginning. It was hard for me to avoid sleeping in and taking naps all the time because that's what I would do normally on my downtime. And so now that I have all this free time, I can't just keep turning to taking naps. But I would just say for me, the hardest part was I have days where it's hard for me to find value and purpose. And, the Lord has been able to really change my heart and my attitude and remind me like, I need to take advantage of the time that I have. I need to, I can be productive with all this time and really just seeking the Lord and how to use my time wisely. So. Yeah.
Wow, that was a great answer. I think that's a struggle for all of us is those lulls of non-production that turn into 3, 4, 5 hours of non-production, and taking time to evaluate how can I find purpose in this time slot, So that was a great answer, Ashley. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, why don't you kind of share with us for you how that looks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, she crushed that question, so I don't really know how I'm going to follow it up, but I'll give it a shot. So, kind of the funny thing, I guess, is that I'm actually more introverted than most people know.
No, there's no way.
Yeah, I think that most people, because they see me in a lot of social settings with my role at church, they just will maybe naturally assume that I'm really outgoing, that I'm very like extroverted, when really I'm not. I'm very, very introverted. And so with that, the shelter and home stuff to a certain extent hasn't been like as much of a challenge, I guess, for me in that sense. But I was kind of shocked at how difficult it has been to like work from home and stuff, just because there are so many distractions. At home, I feel like I'm so much more productive when I'm working actually at work in my office, And so, not that this is necessarily the hardest part, but I think one difficult thing is, there's so much opportunity right now just to procrastinate on things that I should be doing, or just to kind of give in to like just binge consuming like entertainment. And it's hard because there's so much digital content that we can access these days. It's easy to fill our time with that. But oftentimes that's all that it ends up being, is just kind of a filler of time. And even more than that, oftentimes I think it acts as kind of a distraction from maybe a bigger problem. And so I think the bigger problem with the procrastination and the binging is a really difficult part of singleness is loneliness. And oftentimes the way that singles cope with loneliness is by like binge watching just entertainment, because it's an easy distraction. It's easy to kind of get out of your head that way. But ultimately it will leave you feeling dissatisfied, and really I think without joy as well. And so I think for a lot of singles, the hardest part of their day is loneliness. And I've definitely experienced that, in my life. And I think it's difficult because, most like married people are probably thinking like, I would kill for some alone time. Like I would love to be alone, And so I think a lot of people don't understand how crippling loneliness can be, and how detrimental it can be just to your own health if you don't deal with it properly. And so I think within that loneliness, that's one of the reasons that it's such a blessing that God has given us himself, for one, but he has also given us the church as well. As singles, we need both of those things. And in the gospel, just like everything else, the gospel addresses loneliness. And so we need to know that, we need to believe that. But I think for a lot of people, myself included, loneliness can be a really difficult part of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh, I think you articulated something really well there, is loneliness doesn't get talked about a lot. And it's interesting when I hear married people say they feel lonely. And so it's more than a physical presence.
Yeah.
It's some type of attachment or connection emotionally, spiritually to other people. And so I'm grateful that I've seen both of you connect well into church. And I think that's a great model to be followed. I didn't grow up single, but I grew up with a single mom, and she was in the church a lot. And, to me, I just thought it was awesome. I went around and all these people gave me candy and, rubbed my head and told me I was cute and pinched my cheeks. I was like, all right, if I get food and candy, like, that's awesome. So I think my mom would also say that as well, to have that connection, because it's not just a physical body. It's also having a connection, that someone to talk to, someone to listen to be a part of someone else's life, not just have a physical body, in close proximity.
Well, Eric, on a Sunday morning, if you ever need me to rub your head and pinch your cheeks, just let me know. I'll be there for you.
Wow. My wife's going to be so excited.
Very good. Hey, Josh, you hit on an interesting point, and it is a very important point. It's a good segue into my next question, which has everything to do with the church. I mean, you guys are attending a church and you're a part of the body of Christ, which means you're a part of a group that's full of all kinds of people who are single for various reasons and all kinds of people who are married. And, this is your time now. This is your moment for all the single people in the world to stand on your soapbox and answer this simple question. What do you wish married people knew about the single life? Because, Lord knows that there are a lot of Christian, married, well-meaning couples who are out there to cure this disease of singleness, quote unquote. And there can be a lot of really well-meaning things that happen in the church that really fall flat and sometimes are harmful. So now is your chance to answer that question. Josh, we'll start with you. What do you wish married people knew about the single life?
Yeah, such a great question. I'm so excited to answer this. So many things. So I think one of the main things, as I kind of thought through this question as like an overarching thing, is that, for married people to understand and the church to understand at large too, that singleness isn't a disease that needs to be cured. I think sometimes we kind of view it like it is, a disease that needs to be cured. Or maybe to put it another way, sometimes it's like the church can kind of look at singles and it's kind of like, what's wrong with you? We need to fix that, So it's kind of almost viewed as like a problem that needs to be fixed sometimes. And to be clear though, you kind of mentioned this already, John, too, is that I think it comes from the best of intentions. I think that married couples within the church genuinely want to see singles find a spouse that's godly to spend the rest of their life with. I think that the intentions are good. And, we all know that Eric is dying to meet Josh White Jr.
I just want to hold him in my hands and throw him in the air and catch him and then sneak some candy in his mouth and give him back to you.
Or Joshina. Joshina White. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I say that to say there is a serious aspect to that, singleness isn't a disease that needs to be cured. It's not like a problem that needs to be fixed,
Right.
But it comes from the best of intentions. I think married people really do want to see single people find spouses and have godly marriages and raise godly kids. I think part of the solution though is for married people to realize that marriage isn't what I need most. And to be honest, marriage isn't what any of us need most. What we all need most is the gospel and to become more holy. And God uses marriage to do both of those things, and God uses singleness to do both of those things as well, to varying degrees. And so I think part of that solution is understanding, that marriage is a great gift from God. It's an institution that He established to be beautiful and to accomplish His sovereign purposes. But that's ultimately not what I need most in my life. And to give you a bigger perspective, think about the fact that you as a person will exist forever. Just think about that statement. You will exist forever. Now, the majority of your existence does not include marriage, because Jesus says in Matthew 22:30 that after the resurrection in the next life, there is no marriage. It's not something that endures through to the next life. I'm not saying that you won't know your spouse in the next life, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, we don't have time to get into the theology of that right now. But the majority of your existence, you're not going to be married. And so I say that to say that singleness isn't as strange as sometimes we maybe think it is or make it out to be, and that marriage is temporary, and God uses both of those things to grow us in holiness and to draw us closer to Himself, And so I think that there are helpful things that married people can do towards singles, and there's also hurtful things as well.
So Josh, what are some of those things? What are some helpful things that you see in the church, and what are some things that you're seeing in the church that can sometimes be hurtful?
Yeah, sure. There's kind of a handful of things that I thought of. I'll start with kind of maybe we'll start with the hurtful things, and then we'll get the painful stuff out of the way.
Yeah, let's do that.
We'll move on to the helpful stuff.
Are you just going to say blank, 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 Eric, blank, 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 Eric? Is that how this is going to go?
No, I
promise. At one time when Eric did this?
Not at all.
Okay,
so some things, and I'll kind of, as we get further down the list, I'll go into a little bit more depth of what I mean. But, I think some potentially hurtful things that can happen is, one, if you as a married person are always trying to set up that person with someone else, that single person may like that, but they also may not want you to do that. So I think that's one thing that potentially can be hurtful.
Let me qualify that really quick. I'm sorry, Josh. When I see a pretty younger girl, I'm like, she needs to meet Josh. It's just the natural first thought I have. And then I look to my wife and I say, do you think she would go well with Josh? Doesn't matter if I'm in Southern California, Northern California, or Kenya. Yes, Josh, Kenya. I'm going, maybe she could be the one. I don't think you're depressed. I don't think you're miserable. I just, for some reason, think like, oh man, it's part of my job to help Josh, even if he doesn't want it. But I can clearly see I need to back off, man. I'm sorry.
It's very thoughtful of you. No, and a lot of these are, you know, I wasn't going to get this necessarily till the end. A lot of these are they can be hurtful depending on the person. And that's the important thing that I want to stress with married people, is that the most important thing is that you need to be intentional in knowing what singles, you know, like and what they don't like. You know, to be honest, I experience all of these, you know, so-called hurtful things, but I know that it comes from very loving intentions from the people in my life. And so a lot of things on this list for me are not personally hurtful, because I know the people in my life who are doing these things, and I know where they're coming from when they do them. But that's not the case for everyone. Some people really don't like being, you know, maybe set up with someone else. Some other ones that I thought of too is just, for example, like if you're always bringing up like their singleness in your conversations, somehow that can be certainly frustrating to them potentially. If you're always joking about them being single in front of them, that can be hurtful as well. And then, you know, one of the main things that I thought with this is, I think a big one that can be hurtful is not inviting someone who's single to hang out because you assume that they don't want to hang out with married people. And to be honest, the not being invited hurts more than just the potential of you being the only single person there. And so
hold on. Let's repeat that. That's huge. So if you're not listening, we're going to go over that again. And I think it's big because I've struggled with that. Like, do I ask them, do they want to be around a bunch of married people talking about kids? And you almost talk yourself out of it. And what Josh is saying is it's better to have the awkward conversation and give them the opportunity to make the decision. Is that true, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. If they really feel uncomfortable, then I would let them be the one to say no, from my personal perspective. I'm in a place in my life where I genuinely don't care about going to a group and are there going to be singles there, or is it just going to be married people? Personally, that doesn't bother me. So in that sense, it's just, I just want to hang out with people, you know, and I just want to see the people that I love and spend time with them. And so, like, to me, it doesn't matter like whether or not I'm the only single person there. I just want to spend time with people and to build those relationships. And so it ends up being more hurtful when you're just not invited to something because it was like a couple's thing, you know?
Right.
And so that's where I would encourage, you know, with a lot of these things, I would encourage, you know, the married people, like, you have to be intentional with singles, and your relationship with them should not be solely based on like what their relationship status is. There's so many more important things in your relationship than whether or not that person is single or married. And so you need to be intentional with that person. And to be honest, like, if you build a good enough relationship with someone, you're probably not going to have to bring up whether or not they're seeing someone, because if you have a good enough relationship with someone, they're going to want to tell you those things when they happen, most likely, you know? And so I would refrain from, making that like a part of your conversation every single time like you're talking with that person, and just try to get to know that person for who they are and for what they like doing and the things that they enjoy, and stuff like that. And so that's some things that are hurtful. Potentially gauge those things, be intentional with singles. Some things that are helpful, we mentioned this already. I would say as a married couple, you may already understand this, but I would say understand how crippling loneliness can be for singles. And I would say with that, the practical application is don't underestimate how much a text can mean to someone. It seriously can mean so much to someone to just reach out to them and just say, hey, how are you doing like today? What's going on like in your life? I'm so thankful to have so many people in my life who have done that for me, and so don't underestimate how, important that can be. I would say for married people, one thing that's helpful is invite singles into your life, even if it feels awkward. Invite them to kind of to see your marriage and to see what your family looks like. One of the best things for singles is seeing what marriage actually looks like and what parenting actually looks like. And you need to invite them into your home in order to do that.
That's all coming from a certified introvert, so it's gotta be true.
Yeah.
Very good, Josh. That was packed full. I hope that everybody who's watching, following along, you can go back and rewind that. I know I'm probably going to need to, but I mean, to sum it up, basically, it's the same for single people as it is for married people. We need to come back to that central truth that our marital status is not the truest thing about any of us. And we need to first see one another as brothers and sisters in Christ before we attach any other labels to one another, and to act accordingly. Ashley, what about you? From your perspective, if you could just, talking to all the married folks out there, what are some things that you wish married people knew?
Yeah, I mean, I think Josh kind of touched up on everything, but there are a couple things that I'd like to elaborate on. One, I mean, I completely agree with Josh as far as pushing and encouraging single individuals to holiness before marriage, before becoming a spouse. Just remembering that our goal at the end of the day is to serve, worship, please the Lord, and it's not marriage. Marriage is not my goal, with everything, with all that I am. But as far as what's hurtful and helpful, I think one thing that I've received as hurtful is a lot of women have compared their singleness journey to mine, and for them, their singleness journey was very dark and depressing and lonely and hard, and they would kind of put that on me as if that's what my journey had to be too. So they would kind of approach me as if, how is it? How's life? Are you dating yet? Oh, and, they would kind of look at it as a disease, kind of as Josh was saying, but just the way that you approach it. And I don't know, I used to be a little bit more considerate, of who I am, how I'm doing, because I'm actually not lonely, and I wasn't really thinking of my singleness as a bad thing until you approached it in that way. Or, maybe I should be like, oh, does this mean that I have to be lonely if everyone perceives singleness as lonely? And honestly, I'm pretty open about it. I've been single my whole life. I've never had a boyfriend. I mean, there have been guys that have come close, some guys that shouldn't have come close, but never had a boyfriend. And
Amen.
and this goes on to the later topic, but recognize that I'm pretty content in my singleness, and please don't ruin that by throwing the word loneliness and depression and all these negative terms to my journey. But recognize, I'm good. Thanks for asking, but I'm good. But I think that's been one hurtful thing, is just some now married people comparing their loneliness journey to mine and saying that it automatically is depressing because that's what yours was. So I don't know if you've experienced that too, Josh, but maybe it's a woman thing. I don't know. But as far as what's helpful, I would agree too with Josh as far as letting single people in, because I have so many great married friends. I all my married friends I love, and I've never been offended, honestly, by them. I think I am in a place where I can respect the boundary of, what married life is like versus what single life is like, but also doesn't mean that we can't be friends anymore. Like, please, let's go out to coffee, let's go on a walk, let's talk. And I appreciate when my married friends, like, they'll tell me what's going on in their marriage. They'll tell me, like, they'll talk about in-laws, they'll talk about their husband, but in a way that, how can I grow? This is what I'm struggling with. Pray for me. And it becomes preparation, I think, for me. This is what I need to look for. These are things I need to be aware of going into a marriage, one day. And I think having married friends and having people who let me in has really prepared me more and given me a more realistic perspective of what marriage is, and has helped me realize maybe this is why I'm not married today, but also this isn't something that I want today. So I don't know, I think it's really good to have a realistic perspective, because I don't know, if someone were to lay out what marriage was going to be when you first entered into it, would you have immediately jumped on it? Probably not, right? Okay. So I feel like that's what my married friends are doing for me, is giving me those realistic, trials and victories. But yeah, it's just been good preparation to be let into my married friends' lives. And yeah.
Wow, that was great content. And let me affirm you that I did not have a good look at marriage going into marriage, because I didn't have a ton of married friends when I was in college. I didn't grow up with a dad. And I probably could have saved myself a lot of stupid statements, a lot of stupid thoughts, if I would have had a broader perspective on what it's like. And I think the part, growing up an only kid, that hit me the most was sharing passions, because I didn't have to share. If I wanted this, I went there. If I wanted that, I went there. And so a question we have is, like, how do you embrace being single? But I mean this in a good way. So, like, for example, when you sit down on the TV, if you want to watch something that's more full of tears, you don't have someone else saying, I want explosions, right? And then you have to work out some type of arrangement, or fine, let's watch what you want to watch. Or if you are trying to decide what to eat and you hear the word cheeseburger, but you're wanting a salad, you're like, well, what cheeseburger place has a good salad, right? You don't have to go through these things. So in that kind of light, how do you embrace being single, Ashley? Like, share with us that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I touched on it a little bit, but honestly, and I'm sure Josh can agree, but it's learning to be content with where you are, and also learning to be content with the relationships that you do have. So you bring up, kind of the compromise, or what you need to work through as a married couple, and being considerate of that person with every decision. And so I'm learning that as a friend, as a roommate. I'm learning, okay, this is, kind of what her schedule is like. This is kind of, what's okay with her. And so, kind of just remembering to, like I mentioned before, at the end of the day, like, I'm submitted to the Lord. And part of that is learning how to love others. And so I think just being in relationship with other people and generally learning how to love others and how to be considerate. I think as a single person, we're able to learn that through the relationships that we have outside of marriage right now.
Okay, let me dig a little bit deeper. Can you tell me, like, what's that moment where you're like, oh man, I'm so glad I'm not married? You know what I mean? Where you just kind of like embrace it, like, oh. So
it's definitely just my independence. Like, being around married couples, they constantly, let me ask my husband, let me do this, let me think about this. And for me, I just freely get to pick up and go. I get to pick up and do what I want. My schedule isn't attached to anybody else. So there's moments where I want to go to the beach today, and I just, can call up my sister and we can just go. Or, I want to, I don't know, just the freedom as a single person. I love the fact that I can pursue a master's without having to consider, my husband's life, my husband's job, my kids' schools, my kids' teachers, friends. I'm just thinking about myself. So as far as pursuing a master's, it was pretty easy for me to decide, why not, Ash? You don't really have any heavy strings attached here, so you can. So I think that's one area where I'm just like,
Great answer. Great answer. I love that. Yeah, take advantage of your freedom, girl. Have some fun. Josh, what about you, man?
Yeah, man, you pointed out some great things. I think before I get down to maybe some more serious answers, like there are so many just great benefits that come with singleness. A big one, honestly, is financial freedom too. In a lot of ways, you kind of talked about having your own passions and stuff like that, and I think one thing that's great with that is that sometimes things that you're passionate about cost money. And as a single person, you're more free to spend more money on those things that you love doing. For me, a lot of times that's like playing electric guitar, and that can be very expensive. And so not having to have that burden of like, okay, I actually can't do this because I need to support my family. And like, so I think there are just a lot of benefits from that. I think, you had mentioned like what makes you think like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not married. A lot of my friends are married, which is great. But a lot of them got married at a very young age. And so they were married young, and a lot of them were still in school at the same time. And I watched, and God did great things through their lives and through their marriages through that season. But for me personally, I look at that and I think I'm so thankful that I didn't have that in my own life, that I was able to, do my bachelor's degree, do my master's degree, without having, to figure out how to be a husband. I didn't have that burden because there's already enough burden for me in figuring out how to pass seminary and work a full-time job, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, those are kind of, I guess, some of the maybe more fun answers to some of the questions you were asking.
Yeah, well, and you were trying to figure out how to work for John Harrell. So, I mean, that's always, he set some high standards. And,
what more could you possibly want or need?
Yeah, so that was a lot to figure out, Josh. I commend you.
Well, hey, kind of along those lines and taking it a little bit deeper, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul talks about, he talks about the value of singleness, which I can't remember the last time I heard a sermon preached on that. Well, when we went through 1 Corinthians recently. So sorry, Eric. First,
I'm not as memorable as Josh and Ashley. I get it. I don't take offense.
But in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul writes to the unmarried, and Paul was one of them, to the unmarried and the widows, I say that it's good for them to remain single as I am, but if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. He says to, if I back up here, he says, now as a concession, not a command, I say this, I wish that all were as I myself am. That is, I wish all were just like me. And Paul was, the quintessential single. I mean, he picked up and he went. God told him to go to Macedonia in a vision, and he picked up and he went. He didn't have, people who relied on him in the way that, marriage and the family structure kind of creates that. So there is value, of course, to singleness when it comes specifically, as Paul writes, to ministry and the ministry of the church. And so why don't you just briefly, this is our last question, why don't you guys just speak to that a little bit? Josh, how has singleness impacted your spiritual life or the ministry that God has placed in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. The foundation of that, kind of as Ashley had mentioned in the previous question, I would say the foundation of that really is contentment. That if there's anything, in order for you to see the benefit of that verse in 1 Corinthians 7, it really has to be founded on contentment. And the idea that you can be completely satisfied in Christ and have everything you need in Christ. A great definition that I found of contentment was internal satisfaction, which does not demand changes in external circumstances. And so
is that the one you wrote in your book?
No. And so the idea that there is an internal satisfaction that comes from knowing and being known by Christ, and that's not dependent on the circumstances in your life, whether you're married or whether you're single. So I think it has to be, in order for you to see the benefit of singleness, just in ministry in general in your life, it has to be founded on that contentment, really, for it to work. But with that in mind, there's so many ways that singleness has impacted my spiritual life. God has used it greatly in my life to help me grow. Some of the things that I thought of, it has helped me genuinely believe that Christ is all I need. It's helped me realize that even when everyone else's circumstances around me are different than mine, that's okay. And I can trust and be content that Christ is genuinely enough.
Amen.
There's kind of this idea in our culture. I watch a lot of like Christian memes and stuff. And like I even saw one this morning too. That was like this picture of this sad person, and it was like, Jesus, please, like, don't let the world end yet. I'm still single. And that's kind of, sometimes it's funny, but it's true. Like sometimes that's kind of how singles think about singleness to a certain degree, is kind of like, I want Jesus to be back, but like not before I have the chance to like get married and have kids. And the underlying thing that you're saying in that is essentially that Christ isn't enough for you, because the reality is it will be a beautiful and glorious, absolutely glorious moment when Christ returns. And if you are single on that day and you're a believer, you will be rejoicing at the coming of Christ. It will be so glorious and majestic and beautiful, and something so to look forward to, And so it's given me the right perspective on that Christ is genuinely enough. I don't need to be married before Christ returns, or have kids before Christ returns, or have sex before Christ returns. Christ is enough. That's all I need, right?
Yeah.
So that's one.
Josh, you just took a single question and tied it into eschatology.
Yeah,
I think you really are becoming a little mini theologian, man.
I love eschatology, though.
But it's a good point, though. If Jesus comes to take us, and I'm playing with this a little bit, and on your way up to Jesus, you're looking down going, man, I wish I could have stayed longer. Really have a low view of Jesus.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So it's really helped me grow in having the right perspective. It's really helped me grow in having patience, in trusting that what's difficult with the patience it's difficult being patient when you look around and like everyone else is married around you, basically. It's really challenging to be patient. And so obviously as we've learned in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, that patience is something that God deeply desires us to have in our lives. And so it's a patience that has grown, not in the sense of, okay, I can be patient because I know that God's going to provide me with a spouse. That's not genuine patience. That's false patience. Patience is, I'm going to wait on the Lord's timing. And if his timing is for me not to be married, not to have a spouse, then that is okay. And I will be okay. And so growing in that sense of having patience in my life and trusting that God is going to work all things for my good. I can be patient in that. It's forced me to pray to God deeply, and yet at the same time to trust that God answers prayers according to his own sovereign purposes. I do genuinely, it's what a beautiful thing that God even listens to us. If you think about the magnitude of that statement, that God in his majesty and being almighty, that he would even care to listen to what I have to say, let alone care about the things that are going on in my life, and that I could actually ask him to provide me with a spouse. That's a beautiful thing that we can do. And so part of it is praying and knowing that God does want to know what's on my heart. And I can pray, God, please provide me with a spouse. I do desire to have a spouse, to have kids, to have a family in the future. But ultimately, I trust your divine plan in this area of my life. And so help me to trust you, help me to wait, but I'm still going to keep asking and keep trusting, no matter, what the outcome is going to be. Another aspect is that it's allowed me to be more generous with my finances as well. We kind of talked about the idea that you could spend more money as a single on your passions, but I think it's also a great opportunity to be incredibly generous with your finances. Not only generous with your finances, but also generous with your time as well, because you have more of it than married people do. And so you can be very generous with those things. I can serve in a lot of ways in the church, even outside of my normal job. So it's my normal role at church. I do a lot of things, but I still have a lot of time. So I can also still serve at church and be generous with my time as well. And so those are some of the things that, the ways that singleness has impacted my own life.
That's great. Really, really good. Ashley, what about you? How is it specifically for you personally? How has being single informed your spiritual life and shaped your ministry?
Yeah, honestly, I would say being single has been the greatest benefit to everything that I've been involved in. But I mean, for one, it has taught me to be just really independent with my faith and my relationship with the Lord. Like, I look and I love the accountability that a marriage has in their relationship with the Lord and following and being committed to the church. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to recognize that and, be in community with, other believers still and still have the independence and just that strong relationship with the Lord. But also to touch on what Josh was saying is recognizing, and this is something that I learned too in high school, as early as high school, and I'm so glad I learned this, but someone told me, God doesn't promise marriage in the Bible. Like, marriage is not a promise to everybody. And I had to recognize, am I going to be content in my singleness? And that means marriage or not, are you going to be content? And so I had to ask myself, okay, Ash, I love you. God's telling me that he loves me and he has all these plans for me. But what if that doesn't include marriage? Am I still going to love him? Am I still going to serve him? Am I still going to worship him? Yes.
Amen.
I recognize, marriage is really just a bonus to life, but so can singleness, And so I just kind of, I don't know, I didn't really idolize marriage as much as a lot of other people have, which I've seen. And so I think it's been important to me just to have that mentality of marriage isn't a promise to everybody. And so not having that standard, because a lot of people will hold that and say, all right, God, I'm here, I'm 24, graduated college in my career, ready to be married tomorrow, and it's like, that's not what scripture says. It's not, a valid promise in the Bible. And so I think learning that at an early age really helped shift my singleness mentality of being content. But also because I've been single, I've been able to serve in ministries that I probably never would have had I been married 5 years ago. But it's crazy because I hear this question, I'm thinking of all the areas that I've served, and literally, I think I've served in almost every ministry of the church. As far as nursery, kids, VBS, junior high, high school, college, missions. It's crazy to think that I've only served, not only, but one of the main reasons is because I'm just available, and I have the time to do it, and there's a need, so Lord, use me. And it's crazy because I look back and I look at, what he's taught me by serving in those ministries, what I've learned, how I grew, what was exposed in myself. And so I think it's really cool just for me to look back on every single season of my singleness and how he's used me in different areas of ministry. And I've learned the ministries that I enjoy and the ones that I don't enjoy, the ones that I'm really passionate about and the ones that I'm not so passionate about. But I think that has been a big help. And I've just learned a lot just by being able to serve and being available to be in ministry, more than I would have if I had 5 kids and a husband right now. So
Yeah. Well, and that's just fantastic because it's also very biblical. You look at that 1 Corinthians 7 passage, it's very clear. And it's like married people have worldly passions and worldly desires, where single people can worry about godly things and godly desires. And, that's just a great side of this to not lose sight that it's not an illness, and a lot of good can come from it, and a lot of serving the Lord, and a lot of joy from knowing you're doing what he wants you to do, and you're doing it because you're available to do it. You're not hurting another relationship. You're not letting someone down. You're not trying to pick between two people. You get to just serve and give at a level that's harder in a married life because you have more things to consider.
yeah.
So I appreciate both of you for coming on the podcast. It's been great to hear the deeper impacts and really how rooted in God's word both of you have been to this process, and the joy you see in where God has you and your willingness to trust him in this. And that's amazing. So I want to say thank you, and also give you an opportunity if you wanted to add anything. Ashley, are you good, or you want to add anything?
Just closing, Christ is enough, married or not, single or not, widowed, divorced. At the end of every day, I would hope and pray that every believer would find their contentment and joy in the Lord alone.
Awesome. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with what Ashley said. One thing I think that just we didn't mention a whole ton. We talked kind of a lot about what are some things that married people can be doing to serve singles, but it's a two-way street too. There are also some things that singles need to be doing as well. We already talked about contentment, but one thing that I do see, I think, in a lot of younger singles is just this kind of frustration when it comes to spending time with married people. And it's almost like I've seen, people just almost feel like so frustrated that they can't hang out with married people because it just frustrates them so much. And so, one thing I would really encourage you in your season of singleness, whatever that looks like for you, is understand that if you're so frustrated that you can't hang out with married people, that's a problem in your own heart that you need to deal with. And most likely you're potentially idolizing marriage. You are potentially being jealous. You're potentially coveting. You're being discontent. And all of those things are going to prevent you from having the abundance of joy that you can have in Christ. Sometimes there's this idea that I can't really have the abundance of joy in Christ if I'm single. And that's just a lie. It's completely false. And so my encouragement would be work through some of those things. If you're experiencing those frustrations in your own heart, to come to a place where you can hang out, you can be content, you can experience the fullness of joy that Christ has for you. And then I think you're really just going to enjoy just hanging out and building relationships with people, regardless of whether or not they're single or married.
Cool. So again, I want to say thank you. My wrap up will be this. Something Ashley said I just think needs to be restated. She said that marriage is not my idol. And if you're married, you know this to be true. If marriage was your idol, your spouse let you down. No spouse can bear the weight of only what Jesus was meant to be. And so that's just great reminder for married people that your spouse is not your Jesus. And if you're single, that other person is not your Jesus. Only Jesus satisfies. And so I loved seeing that in both of you. Thank you guys for coming on. Hand it over here to John.
All right. You've been listening to the LBC podcast, a podcast of Laurel Glen Bible Church in Bakersfield, California. If you liked listening to this podcast, please share it with a friend and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all new podcasts. Thank you for listening, and God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Bye.